All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our first ever town hall. My name is Ishita Kostrish, and I am the executive director of Leveled Legislation. Leveled Legislation is a youth-led grassroots organization working to promote women's rights, especially under the law. We do so by mobilizing youth to support current legislation, creating and presenting new policies, and educating changemakers worldwide. We are an international organization with members from Qatar, Vietnam, and Tennessee, all working to push for gender equity and women's rights in our communities. We are so excited to have you here. And as you are aware, our aim for this event is to discuss the pressing issue of the gender pay gap. We are grateful and excited to welcome Ohio Senators, Senator Smith and Senator Hicks-Hudson, who will be participating in today's conversation, as well as a group of fierce and committed women who will be sharing their own experiences as members of the female workforce. Before we kick off the town hall, we would like to remind you a couple of things. So first, please turn off your microphone to be respectful and attentive for our panelists today. You can also feel free to type your questions in the chat box, and questions will be entertained during our Q&A session. For our agenda today, we will first be discussing some background on the importance of equal pay. We will also be going over some current legislation regarding equal pay. And after that, we will have some testimonials where we discuss problems women in the workforce encounter. Following that, we will talk about some ways to get involved in the fight for gender equity. Now, without further ado, please welcome our policy co-director, Desiree Lawrence.
So, hi, as Ashita said, my name is Desiree, and the issue of the wage gap continues to prevent women from equal levels of success in their careers as their male counterparts. In Ohio, the average working woman is paid 79 cents to her white male coworker's dollar. For women of color, this number is even less. Our organization has done extensive research on these issues, and here to present are a few of our members. So first up, we have Caroline Martin. She is my partner, so the other co-director of policy, and she is going to be presenting her research on the Fair Paycheck Workplace Designation. Caroline?
Oh, Caroline, I believe you're on mute. Can anyone else?
I am. You're right. I am. Sorry. Hello, my name is Caroline Martin. I am co-director of the policy team for Leveled Legislation. I am from Ohio, and I will be presenting a piece of legislation that was actually proposed in 2021 by Senator Monique Smith and Senator Ken Smith, who we are lucky enough to have here with us today. The policy, the Fair Paycheck Workplace Designation, was introduced as an incentive for employers to enact equal pay policies with the expectation that such a designation would increase the number and quality of applicants and employees to the qualifying companies. According to a 2018 study by the Institute for Women's Policy Research, quoted by Senator Smith, a woman in the state of Ohio, which is the 33rd ranked state in the US for pay equity, will not receive pay equal to that of her male coworker with the same level of experience until 2067, should current trends continue. Proposed policies such as the Fair Paycheck Workplace Designation continuously attempt to change that statistic, and many others. And now, Desiree.
Oh, well, thank you, Caroline. So now we have Kaya Mahajan. She is the Director of Education here at Leveled Legislation, and she's going to be presenting her findings on HR 7, the Paycheck Fairness Act. So Kaya, if you will.
All right, hello everyone. My name is Kaya, like Desiree said, and I am the Education Director here at LL. I'll be presenting a piece of legislation called HR 7. It was introduced by Representative Rosa L. DeLauro in January 1st, 2021. Otherwise known as the Paycheck Fairness Act, H.R. 7 looks to provide more effective remedies to victims of discrimination in the payment of wages on the basis of gender and other purposes. The act essentially requires employers to create a more equitable work environment. This involves banning retaliation against workers who discuss wages and allow for workers to challenge systemic pay discrimination through lawsuits if needed. Essentially, H.R. 7 reinforces the Equal Pay Act with more tangible change within the workforce. H.R. 7 is essential to ensuring that families across America earn the money they've worked for and increase financial security for citizens so their money is better spent. When looking at gender equity, it's often easy to take a one-line approach, but the truth of the matter is that working for gender equality in the workplace will not just benefit women, it will benefit their families, their children, and the nation as a whole. These are not wide-sweeping claims. Rather, they are recurring patterns found in nations with a higher gender inequality index. Gender equity, especially in pay, allows for more cohesive societies and better macroeconomic stability. By passing more legislation like H.R. 7, we boost equality and the public/private sector simultaneously. The reality is that gender equity in the workplace is beneficial for everyone. With that being said, I'll hand it over to Desiree.
Thank you so much, Kea and Caroline, for giving us some amazing background on that topic. With all that being said, we're so excited to finally get started. We are going to be introducing some women in the workforce. Understanding the opinions of the general public is imperative when considering new policies and legislation. Today, we aim to give all of you a platform where you can hear real stories of gender discrimination in today's world. While she was unable to attend tonight, we received a statement from Judy Sudomir, who is an educator in the Akron Public Schools. Kea will be reading her testimonial.
Okay. Women are affected by the loss of seniority after years home caring for children. I took 9 years to work part-time and raise the kids. Someone had to do this. The cost of daycare is so high, I would have been working for less than minimum wage after we paid it. And I have 2 master's degrees. When my kids were in full-time school, I re-entered the workforce, but will have lower pay for my entire career as a result, and receive less in retirement. It amounts to a huge lifetime pay cut. Some will point out that this was a choice and a gamble, that my marriage will last and my partner's seniority and retirement will support the family choice. That argument isn't wrong. However, I think the devaluing of childcare and the privilege of the ruling class underestimates the very real impact this has on middle-class families, and is another way women are continually forced to make no-win decisions that make their future less secure. Lastly, we are okay, and then I think Desiree will go next.
Desiree, I think Desiree may have been disconnected, but we are pleased to introduce our second panelist, Monica Bosiljevac. Miss Bosiljevac is an organizer for Nebraska Women in Soccer and an assistant soccer coach for the varsity Marion High School soccer team. While playing for the University of Nebraska Omaha women's soccer team and earning a degree in marketing and management, Ms. Bosiljevac started the Football for World Foundation, USA, a link which will be posted at the end of this meeting and may be found in the chat. She is the executive director and board president of FFTW USA and a BOD member for the Sports Bra Project. Thank you for being here, Ms. Bosiljevac. Take it away.
Thank you for having me. And thank you for reading that bio. As you heard, I am an executive director that works for a nonprofit organization using soccer really as that platform for gender equality. And being a female leader myself, it's something that I'm very in tune with and something that I make sure is ingrained throughout every level, or at least I try to make sure that gender equality is ingrained at every level through our organization. And we do a lot of work in the US, and then we also work internationally as well. So we're constantly looking at how different topics like pay equality And other topics do affect women and how that affects lifestyle and what that might, how that might relate to what they are being paid. And then how does that affect the family and different choices and financial freedoms that women might face. I also, yes, like get to coach a group of high school girls. And so always love using that platform and getting to connect with them at that level to help youth advocate for and set them up for success when you are making financial decisions and choices about life going into career decisions and what that might look like. So thank you for having me here. Really, I think part of my testimonial and part of my story is getting to enter the workforce at, just out of college and working for a couple of years at a different nonprofit. And it was something that right away, the first job that I had, the person hiring me just said, here's your salary. We're not going to negotiate it. And I just said, oh, okay. And it was a great salary, but I imagine, it was the first time getting offered a salary, I just said, okay. I didn't negotiate for anything else. It seemed like a good deal. I'm sure it was. I don't feel like I was outed in any way, but it was something that you just don't necessarily think about right away when you are getting offered a salary for the first time and you're maybe not getting that hourly rate that you used to have while working maybe part-time in college or at another point. I have since then dived into what gender equality work looks like and gotten to mentor so many women over the years. And even working in fundraising, the phrase that I always use is, if you don't ask, the answer is always no. So now when I talk to people, when it is about negotiating or asking for what you want, please ask. If you don't ask, the answer is always no. So that's always my first step. And just when you're going into negotiations. And since then, I've moved into this role where I get to, as the executive director, I'm responsible for setting my own salary and determining what that looks like. And really making that proposition to the board of directors and saying, hey, this is what I think the executive director should be paid, right? And a big part of what goes into that is just doing the research of, here are the comparables across the board, here's what this looks like, and making the case for support for either yourself or making those decisions for people that you are hiring. And so as that female leader in that space, what I try to do is again, be really transparent with staff and what the position is, and be really in tune with, hey, are we hiring? Who are we hiring in this space? Are we making sure that we have a very diverse team? And especially being in the nonprofit field as well, I recognize and am just simply aware that typically females fill those volunteer roles that are unpaid, and you're doing a lot of work that is unpaid. And so I try to be really conscious of that. And as you work through the ranks in the nonprofit industry, you do see more males at higher levels. And so the way that I combat that in just my leadership is, again, filling out, here's our matrix, here's the position, what it's paid, here's why it's paid that, and being able to have the data to back it up, and being first and foremost aware of how these issues might impact how much a woman or man is getting paid. And lastly, I think the final kind of piece of my testimony is, I'm a woman who was previously in a marriage I'm straight, so I was married to a man, and we were very open about financial security and payment back and forth, and understanding that he was in a role that was going to make more money than what I was making, and that was going to impact how we lived our lives day to day. And how we made financial decisions together or apart. And since then, now being divorced, it's also something that I'm hyper aware of. As a single woman, I'm responsible for my financial security, so I have to advocate for myself. And so you just have to be aware of, how do these things impact you? Because financial security and freedom is a total game changer for lifestyle and the choices that you can make. And I know the other testimony talked about childcare and things like that. So that's a whole other box that we can get into in the questions and formatting. But I think for my testimony, it really is knowing about how these things can impact you and your life choices, and then working alongside groups and legislatures like our, and policy advocates to make sure that this is not something heavy that people have to think about on a day-to-day basis, because it takes a lot of, mental capacity when you are thinking about this all the time. And when you have that freedom of choice and financial security, it's really amazing what creative things you can do and problems that we can solve in this world.
Wow. So thank you so much, Monica. That was really, really important, especially, self-advocacy and financial security and freedom. Thank you so much for telling your story. So we are also lucky enough to welcome two senators from Ohio who will be participating in tonight's discussion. First up, we have Senator Ken Smith. Senator Smith has championed women's rights legislation in Ohio through his commitment to equality of women in the workforce, co-sponsorship of legislation protecting reproductive care, and continued advocacy for women's rights. Senator Smith, take it away.
All right, so I had to unmute. Thank you all for inviting me and my colleague, Senator Paula Hicks-Hudson. So let me, so I've introduced and been the lead sponsor on a number of pieces of legislation on the pay equity piece, but let me give you just a little bit of background as to why I think, let me give you two statistics. Well, let me give you one statistic that I just think is overwhelming. The Institute for Women's Policy Research is probably one of the leading groups that does this kind of work. And among their research findings, they indicated that if the wage gap were eliminated in Ohio, we could cut the poverty rate for working women almost in half, take it from 8.6% to 4.5%. And so when I turn to my Republican colleagues and I say, how would you like to eliminate poverty without a tax increase? That can kind of get their attention. And then I say, we just have to pay women equally. And, that slows them down a little bit. The gender wage gap is a persistent feature of the US labor market. And the gender wage gap is a moral failure of American civil society. There's absolutely no reason for it. And so initially I did some research on the topic and found out that Rhode Island had something called a pay equity hotline. And it would allow employees to anonymously report wage discrimination through a phone number or a website, and it would get investigated. And so initially I introduced that piece of legislation in one of my terms, and it went nowhere because the Republicans are in charge in Ohio. And I introduced it a second time. I was working with a representative named Janine Boyd on this. And I still remember the press conference when we introduced it a second time. A female reporter named Jo Ingles, who's very well known in the Ohio State House, basically asked us a question. She was like, you guys introduced this last term and it didn't go anywhere. What makes you think it's going to go anywhere now? And the fact of the matter is, Jo was right. She knew the political environment. Republicans weren't interested in moving this legislation. But so that made me continue to think of what can I do that would be different on this issue? And without giving you a long explanation as to why I got here, I took some classes at the Kennedy School, the Harvard School of Government. And one of those classes introduced the theory of a nudge. And I actually have the class notes. A nudge is a technical intervention. It's a change in the choice environment of an organization or society meant to help people act differently. And so I began thinking on this, and I'm like, well, that's what we need to do with pay equity. And so I, worked with Monique Smith, who we're not related, but we're both Smiths, Democratic Smiths in the Ohio House of Representatives. And we developed this fair paycheck workplace legislation. And the idea was, well, okay, what if Ohio businesses are actually doing their best to, end the gender wage gap, and they're trying to pay men and women who work in that company the same amount? So what if they could, that organization, that business that's doing things the way we want them to, what if they could submit their payroll records and get a designation from the state of Ohio that they could put on their website, put on the front door of their business, that says this is certified as a fair workplace. This is a fair paycheck workplace. And I explained this idea to my lady friend, Nicole, and I said to her, I kind of explained, I'm like, what if there were two dry cleaners in town? One of them had this designation, one of them didn't. Where would you take your business? And she looked at me and she said, where do you think I would apply to work? And I was like, exactly. So we introduced the Fair Paycheck Workplace legislation, actually got some comments from the Ohio Chamber of Commerce. And they were like, well, that's a different way of doing things. And the Ohio Chamber is just kind of notorious for not being supportive of this kind of thing. But the Republicans sat on it. We introduced it in August of 2021. We didn't get to give testimony until the end of November 2022. So, a new legislative term has just begun. I've been elected into the Senate. We're going to continue to press this issue. And frankly, I'm going to be looking for a Republican female co-sponsor in the Ohio Senate and see if we can partner together to get this legislation done, because in Ohio, every statewide office is held by Republicans. The House of Representatives is supermajority Republican. The state Senate, where Paula Hicks-Hudson and I serve, is Republican, a Republican stronghold also. So we're going to have to be creative if we're going to be able to turn this legislation into law. And the other thing that I'm doing is I'm actually having conversations with legislators from other states. I've got a friend who's just begun serving in the Michigan House of Representatives. We've already had conversations about this. Michigan's a completely different political environment. Democrats are in control there. So maybe one of the ways that we get this legislation passed is we have other states pass it first. But thrilled to be with you all and happy to answer questions about this after we hear from my colleague, Senator Paula Hicks-Hudson. And perhaps I just introduced her, but I don't know if that was my job to introduce her, so I'll yield back my time.
Well, we can both introduce her. But no, thank you. I think I really liked how you added this unique perspective of being a Democrat in a Republican-centered state and how you have to be innovative in order to get bipartisan support. And I think that for our viewers, it's very important coming up into this 2023 term. We're looking for new, bold, and innovative ways to drive forward these ideas of women's rights. So, next, I would also like to introduce Senator Hicks-Hudson. She's an advocate for female equity. She recently assumed office in the beginning of 2023. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
As a member of Federations of Business and Professional Women Incorporated and the previous president of the Toledo Women's Bar Association. Senator Hicks-Hudson also offers experience as a woman in the workforce. She is committed to empowering those in her community and frequently participates in service projects. Thank you so much, Senator Hudson, and you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Desiree, and thank you to all of the women who are leading us in this next generation. I'm extremely excited about seeing you and being a part of this. Unfortunately, I think my colleague, Senator Kent Smith, has not the lock on, but he's been the leader in terms of dealing with these issues in introducing legislation that specifically looks to the question of how to equalize pay for women in Ohio. Much of my work in the House and now in the Senate has been focused on maternal health and more on the health side of it. But we work together and we try to collaborate to make sure that voices are heard and that those issues that we're talking about today are being highlighted and uplifted so that they don't go into the background, they don't get lost in the shuffle. This topic is a topic that we should not even be discussing in 2023. When I was your age, and I was a member of the Women's Ohio Business and Professional Women's Federation, and one of the things that we were working on at that time was pay equity. And highlighting, the day that a woman would make the same amount of money that her counterpart would make. And one of the things that always saddened me was that the economic benefit to having fully paid staff that don't have to worry about some of the other challenges of robbing Peter to pay Paul because their wages were not sufficient to do the work is an economic obstacle, not a driver, but an obstacle. Women who have to leave the workplace because of family commitments, either they're having children or they're the primary caretaker for their parents. Are all those things that really hurt women, not only as they're raising their children, but when it comes time for retirement. And we need to look at how to improve and deal with some type of bridge to help those women who, through no fault of their own, but the choices they've had to make, don't have the type of pension or Social Security funds that they need. It is a shame that you have women who are working all their lives and they are struggling because their payments, their contributions into their pension fund was so minimal, or they didn't have that number of years in the fund to get full benefits. And that's not only the wages, but it's also medical and other types of benefits that they might have been able to enjoy if they had the number of times in it. So what does that mean for me and for us going forward in this particular General Assembly? As Senator Smith just said, that we are in the minority. And so we have to be creative and use the power of persuasion. But I come from a perspective of also asking for voices outside of the State House to help us raise those issues and not to let it go. One of the things I think we have been able to do, even while we've been in the minority, is to mobilize and to get our friends, our colleagues, to show up in Columbus, to maybe walk around the State House, walk the halls of the State House, make sure that you contact your representative in the Senate and in the House, and to let them know and tell the story. It is really important to tell the story because those stories I believe can make the difference in terms of maybe not getting further, getting the whole idea passed or legislation passed, but again, as Senator Smith says, to nudge them in the right directions. We know that legislation and getting the law passed is not, well, and it makes me crazy because I think we should take care of things much quicker than the process that we do. We have, I've introduced a bill for the last two General Assemblies, and it's called the Crown Act. A colleague and I, and that deals with the question of how women can wear their hair and not be discriminated by the basis of wearing their hair. We barely got a hearing this year, this General Assembly. We did get a hearing previously, but again, we're trying to work it out so we can get it over the finish line, because that barrier of discrimination based upon the way you choose to wear your hair is so archaic and backwards. But I think it points out what we're dealing with, unfortunately. But I believe that if we look at the business community understands that in order to have the best talent, it doesn't matter about gender. They want the best talent and they need to pay for it. And as Monica talked about, we really need to help educate young women on how to negotiate their salaries. And I think those are some things that I think we can look at. And with that, I'll stop talking and let you go forward with the program. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Senator Hicks-Hudson. I really liked your mention of the Crown Act. I think that we all know about the Crown Act, and it's something that it shouldn't be even a debate. I don't know why we're even debating, its passing, which just goes to show how prevalent issues like these are and why we need to talk about them, because obviously they all aren't being passed and acted upon. Both of you offer extraordinarily unique positions on this issue, so we're excited to hear your answers to some of our questions. So we'll now be transitioning to our Q&A discussion. To our audience members, if you have a question you would like to ask, please type it in the chat and we'll get to it as soon as possible. Panelists, if you have any question that speaks to you particularly, please feel free to chime in first. And with that, I'm excited to pass it to Caroline to moderate our discussion.
Thanks so much, Desiree. We encourage open and educational conversation. We're really excited for this opportunity. However, in order to maintain an organized discussion, I ask that you can type your question in the chat, or you can use the hand raise reaction, which can be found at the bottom of your screen. And I will call on you. If you would like to ask a question but don't feel comfortable asking it yourself, feel free to direct message either myself or one of my team members who have the leveled legislation in their name title, and we can ask that question for you. Please understand that we can't promise to get to all of your questions, but we will be providing the contact information for the panelists, so you can contact them if you need after this town hall. Let's get started. Okay, well, let's start with a question that was proposed by one of our team members, and it is a question for the legislators. What policies and laws have you observed your fellow legislators implement in an attempt to combat the gender wage gap, and have they proven effective? So it does not have to be in the state of Ohio. I know Senator Kent Smith, you mentioned a couple earlier, but we'd love to hear any expansion you have on either of those.
Got on mute. So yeah, I was just putting a link up to the press conference that I did with Monique Smith as we introduced the Fair Paycheck Workplace. And so I'll hit send as soon as I'm done answering this question. So I haven't seen, I've done some research on this topic, and Rhode Island, it was the only state that I saw that had the pay equity hotline. And I thought it was brilliant. Again, if you can, anonymously report wage discrimination, because the research says that there's a wage gap and it's persistent. It's not going away. We've got to take steps to try to narrow the wage gap. Some of the other legislation that I saw from the Institute of Women's Policy Research was this research the data may have changed since the pandemic, but they essentially said that if we do nothing, the wage gap will finally equal out. It'll finally go away in 50 years. And so, whether you're anonymously reporting potential wage discrimination or you're creating a fair paycheck workplace designation to honor or at least, signify the businesses that are trying to close the wage gap intentionally, 50 years is, again, it's a persistent characteristic of the American economy, and it is a moral failure of American civil society. So we can make a difference. So as legislators, as a legislator, I'm happy to engage in this fight because I think it's the right thing to do. But yeah, I have not seen, I think this is a blue state versus red state issue. I think blue states have kind of advanced this issue a little bit and red states haven't. Red states aren't really interested in paying workers more regardless of what their gender is. But still we've got to take some steps to do it. So yeah, I certainly haven't seen anything pass in Ohio that would have helped this situation.
Yeah, and if I can just jump in and really just reiterate what Senator Smith said, we have an uphill battle in the state of Ohio to move for policies that would have fair wages. It's unfortunate, but it is so true. But I think if we look at it from a different perspective, that those occupations that are high management, STEM types of employment. Can't think but anyway, those are places where I think women are able to hopefully be able to negotiate salaries and be able to look across, the data to see what's a fair salary for their experience. So one of the things I think we have to do as legislators is really try to push and promote from the back end another way of those types of occupations and those opportunities, such as child care tax credits, so that women that are working will have more money that comes back to them, and looking at ways to provide more opportunities for if they have to take off because of family requirements or things like that. So, and they're not docked for it, because that's another way that women lose out, because if they're not paid because they're not there because they have to take care of a sick child or deal with the family, which we still have to do, that those are things that we're looking at, and hopefully we'll be able to get some movement on.
So along with that, I've been asked to talk about the New York bill, which is the Pay Transparency Act. Are either of you aware of that? And do you think that something like a Pay Transparency Act, which requires employers to enlist salary ranges in advertisements or on postings for job opportunities and promotions, is something that we could look for passing in Ohio? Obviously, Ms. Bosiljevac, you're not a legislator, but have you seen that sort of a thing in Nebraska?
I'm gonna comment on Paula as well as we segue into the Transparency Act, and answer that question. I love that she points out just those laws that can protect women that might need to go towards childcare duties or, take time off to do that. And then I think just obviously equally as important too is what are those things that are protecting men that need to do those duties as well. And I think that's one of the strongest cases for reaching pay equity, as well as these things need to apply to both, because these roles and responsibilities need to be shifting as well, because it does take multiple people, partners, whatever, it takes a village, right, to take care of childcare. So how can we continue to protect anyone that needs to operate in that space? Super, super important. And then looking at just pay transparency laws, I won't lie, I'm not familiar with what Nebraska has been passing or what's on the docket for them. I am proud that the Crown Act has passed in Nebraska, so excited, yeah, super happy. So I'll lean back into the legislators to educate us on how those laws are being enacted across the country, for sure.
Well, so the Pay Transparency Act seems like it could be beneficial, because again, part of what you're trying to do is just shine a light on these issues, so that so potential employees have some information going into a job setting, again, just to try to minimize the wage gap. One of the things, and you all talked about it in your introduction, but the notion that just a 20 cents on the dollar decrease from what women earn to what men earn, white men earn, and again, that's white women. Hispanic women, African American women earn far less. But if you enter the workforce at 20 and you leave the workforce at 60, 40 years of making 80% is $500,000 of lifetime earnings. And that's where, again, pensions and, the ability to take care of yourself after you leave the workplace is so significant. So again, there's a lot of things that can be done. And we're trying really hard in Ohio but we are a little bit like Sisyphus trying to push the boulder up the hill, just because, there's so few Democrats that are. But one of the other questions in the chat is sort of, what can I do outside of politics? You can do a lot. If you learn, we're going to introduce Senator Hicks-Hudson and I will introduce this type of legislation coming up, and that legislation will get referred to a committee. And once that occurs, that's when you can sort of start your activism if you're an Ohio resident, because you can then ask the committee chairman for hearings on this bill, and it'll have a number at that point. It's got to get introduced first. And so you would ask the chair of the committee to have hearings, and you could ask the governor to support it if it gets to his desk, and that kind of thing. So there's an awful lot of ways that you can be engaged. And if you send an email to the chair of the committee where the legislation is gathering dust, if you copy your own representative and senator and either the Speaker of the House or the President of the Senate, that's the way that, those are the folks that are making the decisions what pieces of legislation advances.
And if I could just jump on there, and while that is the help that we could use within the legislative process, letters to the editors, talking it up on Facebook, social media, get on, podcasts, all these things to really get the buzz going about what is happening. And this legislation is good, or the legislation is bad, and why the legislation is bad, and it's not doing what it's supposed to do. One of the things I keep thinking about is that some things may or may not require law changes, as it requires us to educate ourselves and be more savvy about how to negotiate. I come from a part of Ohio that is strong labor, strong unions. And so the issue of wage gaps or differences between men and women, those are negotiated out because of contracts. And I use that as an example that we have to teach women who are not going into maybe an hourly rate, but even with an hourly rate, to make sure that hourly rate is equal to a male with the same experience, the same or similar, I won't say same, but similar experience, education, training, etc. Negotiation is very important. So for me, I think we have to work to get women, young women in particular, to know that they have not because they ask not. I'm gonna take what you said, Monica, about the answer. If you don't ask, the answer is no. But I also say you have not because you ask not. And so what we have to do is do these types of forums, Zoom meetings, to educate people on what to do, identify friends in government that can help you, know what the laws are, because there are some requirements of fair wages, and those are things through the Department of Labor at the federal level and at the state level as well. That if someone is being cheated out of a fair wage, there are some there's some laws that can protect them.
And I'll say this too, I don't consider myself to be someone that's specifically in politics, but you have to, no matter what your industry is or whatever your passion is, whatever industry you're working in, your life is impacted every single day by politics. So understand in your industry how the pay inequity gap is impacting your industry, right? And then lean on, if it isn't working directly with the legislators, or if you don't feel comfortable yet, right? You haven't gotten to that stage yet where you're going to make that phone call or send that email. Who is the other advocates in your neighborhood that are working directly with senators? So for us, I know in Omaha, Nebraska, we have the Women's Fund of Omaha, and they're a nonprofit organization. They do a lot of policy work and advocacy work, and they do such a nice job of bridging that gap between politics and, as you said in the question, those outside of politics, on educating the public on, hey, these are issues impacting women. So we want to hear your stories, and then they're the liaison. So is there someone that, you know, a group or other people, again, friends in your network, colleagues, whoever it might be, that can be that bridge as you continue to educate yourself and then support those orgs doing that work in some way, shape, or form, or get involved with them directly too, just to help close that gap, because these legislators need all of our stories too. They're the ones representing us in every industry across the board.
Thank you all. A next question is going to be, do you actively see a more purple spike in bipartisan support for more pay transparency and work equity across the board and on a federal level? Or do you believe that the anecdotal support can trump statistics that seek to discredit our purpose of achieving work inequity? So.
I'm like, I want Paula to answer because I saw her face that whole time and she unmuted and typed.
I did. I was like, whoa. I think that I believe that we have to go for common ground, common interest, moving forward, common. And many of the legislators that I'm looking at have daughters. And so we have to talk to them about what would be fair for their daughters. You're going to get some of the distortion and the lies, but it is actually good business. And it's good business. I'm a Democrat talking from like a business because I'm also a business. I have a business that I have to run. But if I'm not paying a good wage and my employee can't survive, how can, what is the work I'm getting? So I use that as an example, and taking that and finding the common ground with members on the other side. We maintain that the state of Ohio is really purple. It's not red. It's really purple. And we just need to get to educate folks about these issues and how the fact that your daughter is going to make 80 cents, 20 cents less than your son. What's fair about that? And I do think, except for some extreme folks, that fairness will win out. I mean, I have to believe that, or else I would shoot myself, because my trip to Columbus is not as easy as my colleague. He has 71. I have back roads.
So can I just quickly add one other thing, and that is the federal government, could save us a lot of time, so where we are stymied sometimes in red state governments, and I agree with my colleague that Ohio is not red, it's rigged. We are more, we vote a little more purple. We've had Democrats win statewide recently. We've just had more Republicans win statewide recently. But I mean, where we are frustrated occasionally in Columbus, Washington, D.C. can solve our problems. So that we should always be mindful of trying to engage our friends in federal government on this type of issue, but other ones also.
Senator Smith, I don't know if you just saw this question. It popped up in the chat. Is there something that could be done about the pay gap hotline by nonprofits, or does it need to be state funded?
Yeah, no, I think you've hit on a way that we can help that civil society can work to help close the pay gap. One of the conversations I had with Monique Smith when we first introduced the Fair Paycheck Workplace is, I mean, we were somewhat, not that we would have said this publicly, and so don't tell anybody, but, we were kind of like, well, this is probably going to take more than one attempt. Like, we're going to have to introduce this and get people just to think about it, and then we're probably going to have to come back and put another attempt in. And I said, and eventually we take the fight to other arenas, which is to say, City of Columbus or City of Cleveland, City of Toledo, City of Cincinnati, maybe they start seeing the benefit of acknowledging the industries that have closed the pay gap as a way to attract better. I mean, we've got a labor shortage in almost every line of work, and some of that is because we're passing really draconian, reproductive rights measures in the state of Ohio, and we're losing population because of it. But so big city mayors are going to have to worry about, how do I keep my workforce strong? And so, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if a pay equity hotline or a fair paycheck workplace, whether or not these ideas take root in some form or another that is outside of government.
Senator Hicks-Hudson, do you have something to say?
I was looking at the next question in the chat.
Okay, yeah, how about it?
That question was about how do we teach young girls to advocate, and I think giving them the space and and corralling them and gathering them in and having things like this to talk about it and have people like myself and Senator Smith come and be available. One of the things that I have always tried to do is to be accessible, but also to have opportunities for young people to learn about. We've got to teach them as well, but and I'm going to throw this over to Monica, but I also think, being in sports and learning how to play is part of it's part of a team, builds confidence and also shows that you can how you work together, you can reach a goal and accomplishment. So, floor is yours.
Yeah, no, like we were both chomping at it. I saw it too. And it's straight up put girls in sports, provide opportunity, and I'm really not just saying that because it is my platform and avenue that I get to work, but at the same time, that is why that's my platform and the avenue that I choose to work, because there are so many, the gap in opportunities for girls compared to boys to play in sports is so wide. And when you have those opportunities as a girl to play sports, that is, I truly believe, one of the biggest arenas that will teach girls self-advocacy at a young age, and it will increase their confidence. And there is data out there that shows that girls and women that participate in a sport at any age throughout their life report higher confidence than girls and women that don't. And so that right there tells me the power of sport and just how much that can translate into other areas of their life. And you have this cohort and this team of women and girls that support you. And then you have, especially again, when you have a good coach and that positive mentor or role model in your life that's saying, again, advocate for yourself, speak up for yourself, be your authentic self. I think sports provide just that beautiful, beautiful environment to do that. And so enroll girls in sports, provide opportunities for girls to play sports, for sure. It'll translate into every other piece of their lives.
If I can jump in just ever so briefly on that topic, and Senator Hicks-Hudson knows this. I'm a roller derby announcer, and so I call for the Cleveland women's roller derby team, and for 10 years was calling for a team in Chicago also. So one of my motivations for introducing legislation like the pay equity hotline and reproductive rights freedoms and the fair paycheck workplace is my social circles include female athletes who will kick my little announcer ass if I'm not progressive on some of these issues that support them. And one other thing, and this probably has more to do with, I'm one of the older people on this call. I'm probably the oldest person on this call. And one of the things that's central to American democracy is that it's a relay race. I mean, let's keep the sports analogy going. And Senator Hicks-Hudson and I have the baton at the moment, but we're not going to be carrying the baton forever. And quite frankly, all of the rest of you, and I'm 100% serious, are our future's best hope. You've got to pick up the baton. Maybe you're going to get it from me. Maybe you're going to get it from Paula. Maybe you're going to get it from the people that replace us. But you all will be the leaders in the future America that we're trying to create, that we're hopeful of creating, but hopefully you all will actually make some more of this progress. So it is very much a relay race, and we need you all to see yourselves as future runners in that relay race.
And I'm gonna like bridge those two things that they just said. Number one, Mr. like Ken, I'm already like, oh gosh, I said I wasn't in politics in the beginning of this call, but now like, am I gonna have to pick up this baton like and bridge the gap here? But also then like, Paula, to what you said, like making yourselves accessible as a politician. And like, Ken, you just gave a great example. Like whoever thought a politician was a roller derby announcer? Like there's so many ways that politicians like should be accessible and share things like that, that show again, like you have these outside hobbies and you can be your authentic self and you can do all these great interests and still advocate for change. Like that's, I think, one of the biggest like ways to, again, drive progress. And then what makes me excited as well about the future of politics too, is the more and more people in politics that do make themselves accessible and show their authentic selves and then have more diversity in the room. Like it's a really exciting and positive wave and trajectory that we all get to be a part of right now.
I'm going to stop you from saying that you're not in politics. Okay, that's first of all. And I'm going to stop all, and I hope no one on this call thinks that they're not in politics. Now, you may not be, with the R or the D behind your name, but if you're trying to get someone to do exactly what you want them to do, to persuade them, that is the basic definition of politics, is to persuade someone to do what you want them to do. So I am sure everyone on this call has tried to persuade someone to give them car keys, more time out on the weekend, staying up late at night, what have you, and giving an argument and showing why it's important. And if they agree with you and vote your way, you get what you want. So that's politics. It's not a dirty word. It isn't. We do it in every area of our lives. But for some reason, some folks feel that they need permission to advocate for themselves. And I'm here to tell you that if you don't speak up and know that there's someone here, someplace that hears what you're saying and is willing to help you with it. I mean, the fact that we're having this conversation, like I said when I started off, talking about pay equity in 2023, when I'm not going to say what year it was, but a few years back, even longer, that this was a major and continues to be a major push for the Business and Professional Women's Federation throughout the country, not just in Ohio that I'm familiar with, but throughout the country. Leveled legislation can connect with BPWs to, and work, together for moving this issue forward. And with that, I'll, as my colleague says, yield my.
Thank you all. Research shows that intensive parenting provides better opportunities for offspring and better outcomes for their children. Nursing home care paid for by Medicaid is often the alternative to care by family. And as you mentioned, Senator Hicks-Hudson, women are often the individuals who opt out of the workforce to care for their parents. Do discussions about the wage gap usually reflect the value of carers? Have you seen that in policymaking?
I have absolutely seen that issue. And one of the things I thought where you were going to go, Caroline, was to talk about in terms of wage gap. the employees that work in nursing homes and also in childcare facilities, how their wages are abysmal. And so we are entrusting our most precious relatives, our children and our seniors, to folks who are barely making minimum wage and working under some pretty harsh conditions. And so what we have to do, and I think we as legislators have to do, is work on getting the Medicaid reimbursement, Medicare reimbursements and Medicaid reimbursements for nursing homes increase so that folks can get paid more and paid better. Because women that, because of the people that are being cared for, there are a lot of unfortunately bad stories that come out of those circumstances. And then to your question directly, we've got to figure out a way that for women or whomever, and it's true, it's not just a woman's female issue, but a family issue as to who will lose their wages taking care of a loved one. And we as a society have to come up with ways in which to figure that out. I'm not that smart to figure it out, but I think that there's some others that can do that.
Thank you so much, Senator. We're going to ask one last question, and that is, how would you say intersection of our industries, such as sciences, public policy, and labor jobs is being affected by the current state of our workplace environment legislation on any level of government? And on top of that, how can we become more involved with our local governments on this issue?
So the research that I've seen, and I've referenced it in the press conference that we did, that I put the link up in the chat, because we got a question that was somewhat similar to this, and the reason why I referenced the link is I don't have this research in front of me right now, but it looked at the Institute for Women's Policy Research did an analysis of the wage gap in the top 20 occupations where women were most likely to work, and then in the top 20 occupations where men were most likely to work. And the wage gap was still there. Like, so if you were a man working in a woman's, job, you were probably making more. And if you were a woman working in a man's job, you were probably making less. And so there's a multitude of ways that this issue can get fixed. And that's one of the reasons that I call this just a moral failure of our nation. But I'm also inspired. One of the Democratic statewide office holders back 10 years ago or so, probably more than that, was a gentleman named Kevin Boyce. And Kevin is now a Franklin County commissioner, which is the Columbus area. But Kevin used to be the state treasurer. And he has made the statement, because I remember him saying this when we were debating this issue on the floor. He stood up and told, all of our 98 other colleagues in the Ohio House, he's like, look, when I was running the treasurer's office, we achieved pay equity in the treasurer's office. And that strikes me as that was a goal that Kevin had as he was leading that office. And so I think this problem is completely fixable, and it just has to be addressed. This is not an insurmountable. One of my favorite quotes regarding public policy is Buzz Aldrin, who's one of the astronauts that first went to the moon. He said, look, we went to the moon, we can fix child hunger. And his point was, this is not, look, we've done things that are much harder than this. So in terms of the intersectionality, we're looking for leaders on this issue in every industry. the advantage that we have in bringing these issues up in government is everyone is a potential voter. You know, I mean, the work that Senator Hicks-Hudson and I do in Columbus is by definition the people's work. So if we can just, I know there's value in just having that press conference with Monique Smith and announcing the Fair Paycheck Workplace. I know just the articles that get out there can create conversation so we can narrow the wage gap. That's one of the reasons why I'm going to continue to fight on these issues, even though legislation on this topic that I introduced may never become law because of the political dynamic of Ohio. But if I can help Aaron Burns get this passed in Michigan, then I'm going to make, we're creating the ripple effect, and that will only narrow the wage gap, just maybe not as quick as we would hope.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you for sharing all of our panelists. And thank you for all of your questions to our audience members. It looks like we are nearing the end of our event time, so we can conclude our moderated Q&A session. We would like to take a quick Zoom picture. So if everyone could please turn on your camera, we will take 2 pictures. All right, 1, 2, 3, and one more. 1, 2, 3. All right, thank you so much, everyone. I'm just going to share my screen again really quick. All right, awesome. So here we have our panelists' contact information. If any of you would like to reach out later or have more questions we couldn't get to today, you can reach out via email or connect with them by Instagram. And feel free to take a picture of this slide if you want to refer back to it later. Okay. Now, wrapping up with a quick leveled legislation plug, be sure to follow us on our socials to stay updated with all content. For more content on the latest gender equality and women's rights news, ways to get involved and participate in other events like this, check out our social platforms at Leveled Legislation on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and TikTok. And you can also apply to intern with us by using the application link displayed on the screen. All right, and I will pass it off to Caroline.
That brings us to the end of the Gender Pay Gap Town Hall event. Thank you so much, Senator Smith and Senator Hicks-Hudson, for coming out today. Thank you so much, Monica Bosiljevac. We really appreciate you guys' attendance. Additionally, a huge thank you to all the participants for taking the time to attend this event. Our work is far from over, but the insights and discussions from today give us the hope that our work is important and that we can still continue to chug along.
Yeah, so sad that it's over, but if you feel compelled to take further action, what you're going to find in the chat, and we'll also probably email it to our participants, is an advocacy guide that we put together, and it's a useful way for you to know how to get involved. I think a lot of the things that were said by everyone that participated today is just a lot of just useful tips and tricks on how, you know, you can lobby and how we're all in politics. I just now can say that we're all in politics. So yeah, please feel free to look at that advocacy guide, take it with you, hold it, do whatever you got to. And as always, please feel free to reach out to anybody if you have any questions. Your voice is important. And with that being said, thank you again, everybody. Thank you so much.